And now, an hour of mental elevation for divine inspiration. The What If God Were One of Us show. With your host, Adeeb Shabazz. Thank you and welcome to the What If God Were One of Us show. I am your host, Adeeb Shabazz, and I really appreciate you tuning in to our show. Thank you very much, and may blessings and enlightenment flow down and through you. We are here today with a very special guest, good brother, excellent author, William Griggs, and I'm going to be introducing him in just a few minutes. But of course, we're going to go through a little bit of housekeeping for those who have joined us for the first time, especially. This is only my second week back after a long year-plus hiatus. So I definitely want to go ahead and let you know what's going on in case this is your first show back or it's your first show altogether tuning in to me. I am, amongst other things, your author of What If God Were One of Us, which is a, how can I put it, a metaphysical guide or a spiritual guide to recognizing the divinity within yourself. And our guests on this show also revolve around that same premise. All of these guests and their content and what they are about all helps us to recognize the divinity within ourselves. If you're interested in learning more about my book, definitely check it out at my Amazon page, www.whatifgod.net, or facebook.com/whatifgod. And please like the page. I would appreciate it. I am also on Facebook, at facebook.com/Adeeb, that's ADEEB .Shabazz.author. And you can find all the things I'm doing, including my publishing business and everything else that I have in store. Speaking of things that we have in store, I'm working on a great project right now. In case you caught the show last week, we had Ambrose Reed Horton on. Ambrose Reed Horton II is the managing editor of Hip Hop U Multimedia magazine, which I'm proud to be publisher of. And he gave a brilliant summary of what we're about, laying out our mission in precise fashion. And we're about actually making a change in this culture called hip hop, which has gone down the tubes for most people in their perspective in terms of the commercialism. We're looking to bridge the gap that started out with hip hop 40 years ago as of August 11th, 1973. That would be 40 years, August 11th this year, that hip hop began with a party thrown by DJ Kool Herc. And now we're looking at commercialism run rampant. We're looking to bridge that gap so that we can connect people back to that time period where hip-hop was about b-boying, about graffiti artists, about emceeing, about telling stories about our communities, and about the DJ and making people move. And that's what it was all about. And we're looking to bridge that gap between then and now. And, of course, all things must evolve, but we want them to evolve with the principles intact, and we need to restore those principles. So please do look us up on Facebook, facebook.com/hiphopu.me, like the page and see what we're doing, and also give us some criticisms, some comments, some questions, and most of all, your input to how you'd like to see hip-hop evolve, because hip-hop is about you and me. But now I'd like to get to our guest. Our guest, William Griggs, is a brilliant author. I had the pleasure of receiving his book when it was still hot and new on the market at the beginning of 1990. Just a brilliant author. I had never read anything like it at the time. As a young man in my 20s, I really had my eyes opened by his content in the Megalight Connection. He goes back to pre-Adamic times And yes, this is fiction, if you would call it. Some people would call it science fiction, and you might be deceived to think so when you first pick it up. And while we cannot say for sure whether this is what really happened, it came from the mind of William Griggs, and perhaps he has transmitted it. But it is a wonderful illustration of what could have happened. And it is based in lots of fact, strangely enough. And once you read it and then come back to it and read it again, several years later perhaps, then come back to it and read it again, several years later perhaps, you find an evolution within yourself, hopefully. And you tend to see a lot more than what you saw before. So I'm just laying that out for you to let you know what type of book we're dealing with. It's metaphysics at its best, and I'm going to let him go into more detail about it. But let me go ahead and introduce William Griggs. Welcome, brother.
Well, thank you, my brother. I appreciate that warm welcome. I feel like I have to get deep now to justify it.
Not at all. Having known you and known of you and known about you over the past 25 years, I'm sure that you can carry your own. I'm very confident in that. But you really helped me a lot as a young man in, like I said, the early 90s, to see something that I had not seen, really looking at something from a metaphysical perspective. I mean, outside the Twilight Zone and the Martian Chronicles, I hadn't really looked at anything metaphysical at that point. And I ended up actually making a career of metaphysics in addition to my publishing career. I'd like to credit you in large part with one of those pillars that had led me in that direction.
Well, thank you, brother. Well, I was trying to, I set out to do some teaching, but I didn't want to just write a dry treatise on, this is metaphysics. What I wanted to do was try to entertain and weave a story that even if you didn't get any messages, you could still appreciate the story. So that was my intention, and also to try to show more potential than anything else. I think we get caught up on what we can't do or what have you, and one reason why we don't evolve to where we could be is because we don't get that vision of possibility. In the book, let me just give a brief thumbnail. The book takes place on the planet Zarkon, and it's a utopian culture, and it's utopian because everybody's connected. They're connected to each other and to the Megalight. Megalight is the parent of the universe. Connection means that with them, they can send and receive thoughts, and they can feel one another's pain. They have incredible powers of empathy. Empathy is what connects us, but in order to be empathetic, to see yourself in another, you have to see yourself within yourself. And that's the essence of connection for me. So, for example, when you have a war, I'm going off a little bit. Let me get back to my story anyway, and then I'll come back and develop that thought a little more. So,
definitely come back to that because I liked where you were going. Go ahead.
Yeah. I can go off on so many different, branches off the same tree. But so it's a utopian culture, and then there's forbidden fruit. And our concept of forbidden fruit is that it leads to death. But in my concept, it leads to spiritual death because the people become disconnected. And once they become disconnected, they become very selfish and insecure and separate into groups. And it's through these insecurities that it becomes what I call Ronald Reagan's America. I got mine, you get yours, that sort of thing. All kinds of issues come up. Spirituality morphs into finger-pointing religion, and so you have a whole lot of deterioration. It comes to resemble a place we're kind of familiar with already. But through this, a young hero emerges, and along the way you get a lot of suspense, mystery, because things happen that aren't supposed to happen. So you have to try and figure out what the heck is going on, and the more you guess, the more wrong you're going to be, because you can't anticipate what's going to happen in this book. But I want to weave a story that hopefully would captivate, even if you didn't get the concept, and also to teach some concepts along the way. And no two people get the same concept. And it's like you said, as you as you develop, you are supposed to reread the book, and you will get different messages through time on the based on the assumption that you're going to be growing. Now, going back to what it means to be connected versus disconnected, and why that's the basis of the utopian culture. Whenever you have a war, in order to make soldier to make it effective, you have to dehumanize the other. You can't see yourself in the other. So the Vietnamese became gooks or whatever, and something other than human. Slavery, they were able to perpetrate what they did in slavery because blacks became other than. They weren't human. And so when you do that, you cut yourself off from others, but you're also cutting yourself off from yourself. Because to see, in order for me to have a genuine, authentic relationship within myself, which is how I get that power from within that you just mentioned in terms of the divine within, that has to be an honest relationship. I have to see myself. And in order to see myself, I have to be able to deal with my own insecurities, my fears, and what have you. So I can't rationalize my problems, my shortcomings, my failings. I have to at least acknowledge them. And the more I'm willing to do that, the more I have access to that power that is within me. But in order to do that, I have to have a concept that says that which is within me is worth more than the pain I may have to go through to access that. That pain being facing up to my shortcomings. So for many of us, it's like, to me, it's a difference in washing and putting on perfume. You know, when people are disconnected, they put on perfume, they don't wash. When people are disconnected, it's like the man that drops his keys in the gutter, and you find him looking under the street light for him. And, well, why are you looking over here? Because it's more light. So it's doing what the hard work in terms of the authentic internal relationship. But it's worth it because that's where your power is. And the more honest and real you are with yourself, the more you see yourself and others, and the more you join into that universal life force that we're all a part of, and the more resources you have, so that when things go wrong, you don't fall down and break down. You dig within, and you find the strength to overcome it. You know, I think when people understand, I mean, I think it's crazy that, you know, a guy will say, if I can't have you, nobody can.
Nobody can.
You know, and one of the primary quotes I have from the book that I put on a bookmark is when a young man is talking to his mentor, and he says, what kind of discipline is required to have a proper relationship with a woman? And the answer is when you can love fully, give yourself completely to another person, but remain willing to lose her if it's in her best interest. When you can do this, my son, you truly will be a man.
Mm.
That would frighten the heck out of a lot of people because they'd be devastated. But if you got the resources within you, you won't be. You accept pain and you keep on moving on.
Right.
So.
Right, absolutely. And if you've just joined us, you just tuned in, you are on the What If God Were One of Us show here on Innerlight Radio, and I'm speaking with author William M. Griggs. And let me go ahead and give out the call-in number. If you're calling in by Skype, of course, you can do so by logging in and hitting us on Innerlight Radio. And if you're calling in by phone, you can call in at 310-928-7733. And you can also contact us by email if you'd like to email in your questions or comments, and that is innerlightradio@yahoo.com. And I want you to definitely continue on what you were going in and definitely get back to that concept of war and disconnection, because that is so important, especially right now as we are in the process of dehumanizing Arabs and dehumanizing Asians, and we're still dehumanizing Black people or African Americans and so forth. So yeah, we definitely have to get you back to that. And please do speak a little louder. You're coming across a little low. So
Right,
definitely
okay.
speak louder. I want them to get this fully. So definitely. But go
Okay.
right ahead. I want you to continue on that road there.
Well, if, within the context of being connected, any conflict is really a manifestation of a dysfunctional relationship. Okay, because number one, all conflict comes from one thing, and that is creating them. So what I'm trying to look at is not the conflict, but the root cause of conflicts. In order to have conflict, you got to have a them.
Right.
If there's no them, there's no conflict. So
Absolutely.
what is it within us that makes us want to create a them? And part of it is we have all kinds of very dangerous ideas that certain societies perpetrate more than others. I was on a show talking about understanding pain and admitting being wrong, and the host said, well, that's very difficult. And I was like, no, that's difficult because we think that's difficult because this is a disconnected culture, and we're taught that that's difficult. It's not the norm, and it's part of the culture. So being connected and disconnected is both an individual and a cultural idea. So to inflict pain on others or to create of them comes from the idea, and this is firmly rooted in the American tradition, of, for one thing, being better than somebody else, measuring yourself against being better than someone else, and forming an identity based on that. And that, in and of itself, is a source of racism right there. But rather than tackle it head on, what if we just taught people to measure themselves against their own potential?
Mm-hmm.
What if we taught people that before anything exists, it's pre-existed by an idea? Before there's a table, someone had an idea of a table, someone had a drawing of a table, then that table came into existence, whether it's a chair, same thing, television, same thing, and human beings, same thing. Before we existed, there was a blueprint for each and every one of us, I believe, in the mind of God.
Right.
So wouldn't it make sense that our real purpose in life is to try to gain an understanding of that blueprint and grow into it, to become that which we were meant to be, and that the only thing by which to measure our success is against our own potential and not against someone else.
Right.
Especially when it comes to being. Now, if you're an athlete, that's different. That's not who you are. That's what you do. So yeah, you're going to try to be the best. But, as human beings, why do you have to be better than somebody else? Why can't you just be the best that you can be? And that takes on a altogether different kind of idea. But the point here is that being connected or disconnected is not just it's an individual idea, and it's a cultural idea. So when you're in a culture that says when you point one finger at others, you have three fingers pointing back, or don't judge a man until you've walked in his moccasins, those are ideas that are pretty much coming out of a pretty connected kind of concept, fundamental concept. When you have a society that says time is money, you need to check out.
Yeah, exactly.
And most people think time is money.
Oh, yeah.
Because that's what we're taught. And so they'll ask me, well, if it's not money, what is it? Time is life, brother. That's exactly what
time is what you make it. It's a construct. We think that we're just victims and things happen to us. We're taught that from the beginning, and we're not taught that we're actually creating things. Like you said, before there is this thing that's before you, there's a concept of it. We're not thinking about that. When we look at Genesis and we see biblically, being that you're a graduate of a theology school, I'm sure you saw this differently when you looked at it, and it says God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. And God said, "Let there be this," and it was so. That's a metaphysical parable that's showing how things were created in the mind, and then they became manifest.
Right. Well, and the thing with that is that people. One problem I have with, I mean, religion is a very, very powerful force for good, but it's not innately good or bad.
Right.
Okay. Religion without spirituality is probably the most destructive force on the planet.
Agreed.
And we have seen that with the new uprisings, with people flying planes into buildings. We've seen it with slavery in the name of God. We've seen it with conquistadors coming over and enslaving Indians also, and genocide and justifying it in the name of religion. So because the mind becomes short-circuited, because once you get into a faith-based thing that can't be argued with, and you know you're right, especially if you have a vested interest in feeling that way, i.e., having the right to take people's stuff, including their lives, that becomes a very destructive force. But spirituality, which is that intense seeking of truth, as opposed to a specific dogma, of trying to find yourself in others. Now, I had one theological hero, and that was Howard Thurman. And if you ever get a chance to read anything about him, that he was absolutely brilliant. I mean, he was a brilliant man, and I could just give you Howard Thurman quotes all day. One of the things he said was, I always look for my own scent when I meet another man, or the measure of a man lies in the amount of adversity he can withstand and yet maintain his zest for living. I mean, he was just a brilliant brother. But one of the things that he taught was that you should, deal with life to the fullest, as much as you possibly can every minute. And some people thought that meant being happy, and no, it means experiencing the fullness of it, the sorrow, the joy, all of that. It all comes from the same thing. Get as much life as you possibly can, and as long as you have the internal resources, the connectedness, you can do that and become, and it's about becoming. And it's that thing, one of the things I loved about talking to you, and you said how you should read it several times, that you're talking to someone who grows. And where does growth come from? Growth comes from honest self-confrontation.
Right.
If you're never wrong, you never grow. And the ideas about being connected and disconnected are seriously grounded in what's happening right here.
Absolutely.
And, yeah.
We have a caller, actually, I believe, that wants to go and ask a question from the 678 area code. Caller, are you there? Perhaps they called in just to listen. I'm not sure. But caller, are you there?
Yes, I'm here, but I just called in.
Okay, you just called in to listen?
Yes, to listen. I'm just getting the email so that I'm actually new, so I'm trying to pick up from where you all started.
Okay. Well, welcome and definitely listen in. Thank you. All right. Can you mute your phone in any type of way while you're listening, just in case we have any background noise?
It was muted. I'll mute it again.
Okay. Thank you. All right. Brother Griggs didn't want to go right back.
Oh yeah, I was talking about the growth thing. A lot of people don't grow.
Right.
And that's it. Whether or not you're growing or not comes purely out of whether or not you there's a connectedness there. And it's nothing sadder than to run into somebody you haven't seen in a couple of decades and realize that they're in exactly the same spot that they were in when you left them 2 decades ago.
Oh, yes.
I'm sure you can relate to that.
Oh, yes. I think we all can. And, especially the type of people who tune into this show, I think we all can say, yes, we've met those people. And it's painful to actually go back to people you grew up with, you went to college with, and, you come back 20, 30 years later and they're in the same position. You can't really relate to those people. They want to go back to where you at. Let's go hang out and get drunk. No, that's okay. I don't do that. Well, let's go chase some women. No, brother, I'm really not trying to do that right now. I got some things. It's like, hey, what about what's going on in the community? They have nothing to say. Well, what about, spiritual development? Have you tried this meditation? Have you read this book? No response.
in conversation is exactly the same as it was when you left them 20, 25 years ago.
Yes.
Because, and the thing is that time, in order for time to mean something, there has to be movement within that time, or else it doesn't mean anything as far as saying, well, this should have happened over this amount of time. Not
right.
necessarily, if you're not doing anything with it. And that's why I go back to, you're saying that time is money. You only have so much time on this. You only have so much time on this planet, and that's your lifespan. That's it.
That's it.
And
That's
what are
it.
you going to do with it, and who are you going to become? It's not about the destination. It's about the journey. It really is. I look at some of the stuff I've done over the years, and oh my God, I'm still on the planet.
Mm-hmm.
But that's okay. That's okay. I try to be, what I am. I can do metaphysics and stuff like that, but I can also dance and have fun.
Yeah, I saw you skydiving in one of those pictures there.
Yeah.
You're talking about zest for life. You're living it.
Yeah, I'm trying. That was a lot of people didn't believe me until they saw the pictures, especially at my age, to be jumping out of a plane. But it was on my bucket list, and I'm so glad I did it. And for a lot of African Americans, we just say, well, we don't do that, and we need to stop limiting ourselves. We can do whatever we want to do on the planet. There's nothing that's designated white and black in terms of, if you're black, you don't do this, and if that's only for white people. That's crazy. If it's fun, if it's something positive or whatever, if it's something you want to do it. Experience life.
Right. Exactly. People don't realize, along with that, and I'm not saying everybody has to skydive or everybody has to ski or anything like that, but if you want to, you have to go for it, because that's directly connected to our not taking chances in business, putting ourselves in business and actually seeing ourselves as bosses, and really stepping out of the box of the 9 to 5 or the 11 to 7 or whatever you're involved in, working for somebody else. Never actually letting go of that and keeping that business on the side is pretty much the same. As long as you're doing that for in the next 20, 25, 30 years. I mean, there's a time period of transition, but at a certain point, it's time to let go. And what better way to illustrate that than to just, jump off that cliff, and fly, because that's what you're doing. You're really just jumping out there and just letting the wind take you.
Well, many of us don't understand what conditioning is and what conditioning does, and it's what stunts us, and that's why it's so important to understand connection and what it means to be connected, in relationships and everything else. But, we're conditioned we're conditioned, go to school, get a good job. We're not conditioned to create jobs or become entrepreneurs, or, we want to work for a company instead of starting a company, that sort of thing. And, even in child rearing, a lot of African Americans feel like they have to beat the skin off the kids, to get them to behave, because our kids need that. No, our kids don't need that any more than anybody else's. What happened is that there was a time when these United States were so dangerous that if a kid went out like an Emmett Till, and didn't do what you told him to do, he might not come back alive, so you beat him severely in order to get that message in. Well, those times aren't quite the same now, so you don't have to do that anymore.
Right, we have to evolve.
Right. You have to understand why things are done at a given point in time so that you can change them when you don't have to do that. But that requires thinking about things on a level that, people don't normally want to do.
You're so right.
It is about becoming, and I look at so many relationships, like I said, with if I can't have you, nobody can, or you belong to me. What can I get from you? And the inability to put one in the other person's shoes and say, wow, what I did really hurt that person.
Right. We have to bring back that connection that you were talking about. And I'm going to go into that in the second part. I want you to go into that. We're going to go ahead and go to a brief commercial break and return. Stay tuned. What if God were one of us? That's right. Your favorite show is back on the air and is now on Innerlight Radio, the healing frequency. Join me, your host Adeeb Shabazz, as I and various metaphysically oriented guests discuss our God nature and explore the divinity within each of us. Tune in live each and every Thursday at 12 noon Eastern Standard Time, 9 a.m. Pacific Standard Time for an hour of mental elevation. The What If God Were One of Us show, a Freedom Path Radio production, now on www.innerlightradio.com. All right. Thank you for sticking with us during the break. If you're just joining us, this is Adeeb Shabazz, your host of the What If God Were One of Us show, and I'm interviewing a dynamic author, William M. Griggs, who is the author of the Megalight Connection, and we're discussing some very deep things about bringing ourselves back to the connection which we started with. This is a book that one could look at as science fiction or fiction, but really is about our metaphysical connection within ourselves. And we were discussing, speaking of connection, I want to go right back to that connection with the Megalight and that empathy that existed in the book and how that really develops, and the fall also, that forbidden fruit. Mm-hmm. Let's go into that.
Well, like I said, actually, people wound up ingesting forbidden fruit in places where it wasn't supposed to be. So I'm setting up a little mystery right there, like where did this come from? Because it was mapped out on maps in terms of where it would be, so people could avoid it. Mm. And the whole thing about forbidden fruit is, for me, it's an allegory, as I believe the Old Testament is, in terms of taking in something that's going to separate you from the Creator. And if you cut off from the Creator, you cut off from each other, and you cut off from yourself. I mean, it's all tied together, and that's why the place that you start is within self. You know. See
if you can talk a little louder, Bill.
Okay. Sorry about that. Yeah, I understand. It's all about that being connected to each other and to the Creator, and with the forbidden fruit, it becomes, it disconnects folks. They lose that connection, and I think that's the metaphor of the Old Testament. Not so much that people actually die based on it. I don't think we were ever meant to live forever anyway. I think anything that has a beginning has an end. So I don't think, it just wasn't set up like that. And the whole Garden of Eden thing is a whole metaphor in and of itself.
Right.
Can you hear me okay now?
Yes, that's better.
Okay. The whole Garden of Eden thing is all a metaphor anyway, and that's the thing, where I think religion can short-circuit people, because if something contradicts itself, then you can't say that it's literally true word for word, which is how people, react to the Bible. I mean, I'm saying it has some profound concepts in it.
Right.
But you can't say 2 + 2 is 4, 2 + 2 is 5, and they're both true. And I think people do that with scriptures because scriptures contradict each other. You know, I mean, in one, David buys land for $200, and in another one he buys it for $2,000, but they're both true. Jesus he's on a mountain, and he's on the seashore, and they're both true. It's 2 fishes and 5 loaves. It's 5 fishes and 2 loaves, and they're both true. And the fact that you can say, oh, yeah, you think you're being faithful, but for real, in my mind, you're abdicating your responsibility as someone made in God's image by being given a mind to use it, and that, to me, is the sin.
Right, and then people don't look at it like that. They don't look at the fact that we have a responsibility. Going back to looking at Genesis, if we're looking biblically and saying, well, look, there's a responsibility given to this individual, and he failed in his responsibility. They failed. So therefore, what we are looking to do is get that responsibility factor back also, beyond other things that religion actually shows. And let
Mm-hmm.
me just go ahead and give out the number again. If you want to go ahead and contact us to ask a question of our guest today, definitely call us at 310-928-7733 or contact us on Skype at Inner Light Radio. Or you can email in your questions at innerlightradio@yahoo.com. We're speaking with William M. Griggs, the author of the Megalight Connection. But go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, well, while we're at it, let me give it out a little bit of my information too.
Oh, yeah, okay, sure.
Yeah, okay. My website is where the book can be located. That's at www.williamgriggs. Griggs is Griggs. It's all small letters. .net. I can be reached by phone at 312-752-8551. And I also do a blog on politics, race, and it's called the Race and Politics Idea Exchange. And I want to say something else, and that's that spirituality, like religion, is very political.
Oh, yes.
It is extremely political. All religion, well, especially, I know Christianity better, so I can talk on that. But it's all very political. And your spiritual notions, whether or not you're connected to others, is going to determine your politics. You know, if it weren't for politics, there'd be no New Testament. You know, the whole the development of religions is political, and how they impact how we interact with one another is political. And it's either liberating or enslaving. So
Right.
You have a lot of self-hatred that's been based on religion that's been used to enslave the mind. So, you know, I can't stress that enough.
Well, yeah, the whole westernization of the westernization concept, where everything is in a neat compartment, where things are disconnected, and you know, our worship is in this church, and even going to Islam in this mosque or in this temple. That even doesn't have its root in Islam, because Islam was always looked at as holistic in the beginning, and it has lost that. Lots of these major religions have lost the holistic connection between politics, between spirituality and social construct, and just also divided them.
And I think also the fact that a lot of them have become estranged from the spiritual strain within the religions. You know, like in the Jewish tradition, you have the Kabbalah, and in the Islamic tradition, you have Sufism, which is some very profound stuff.
Yes.
Sufism is, is the spiritual arm of Islam, and some very famous Sufi wrote over the years, and they wrote in codes that people had to, kind of learn to use formulas to get all the meaning out. But one of the most famous Sufi was Omar Khayyam, the poet.
Right.
Among others. But getting back to, go ahead.
Now, I was just going to say, when you have Sufism or the Kabbalah or the Gnostics in the Christian tradition, they all served as a threat to the clergy. And therefore, again, back to politics. If you're threatening my position over the people by actually giving enlightenment to the people, then there's a problem, and thus they were ostracized and are
as
still.
Long as God is externalized, you can control people. Because
Absolutely.
You stand between them and God. Okay?
Absolutely.
So, and you have this tradition of, big gargoyles on churches to scare people.
Yes.
Right? And we can excommunicate you. People think that the separation of church and state was to protect the church from the state. On the contrary, it's to protect the state from the church.
Yeah.
Okay. Folks would have kings standing outside in the snow. And not to mention what happened when people came here, and it wasn't for religious freedom. It was to impose their will so that they could tell somebody, call somebody a witch, and then prove the only way you could prove you were innocent was that they tie you to a boulder, and if you drowned, you were innocent, and if you were guilty, you lived. So then they burn you for living. So talk about the ultimate catch-22. But part of the power and what have you, it comes, the serenity also that comes from the internal relationship that just says, am I okay? And there are things that people can do to develop their connectedness. I often tell people to write down their feelings and emotions, and write little emotional journals sometimes, just to get at where they're at. And it has to be something that nobody else can see, and it has to be something that's just yours. It's very, very private, so that you can begin to take some kind of inventory to know where you are. And, it's about self-awareness. But when you have that, not only can you let go when a romantic relationship breaks apart, but everybody's going to die. And when you lose a loved one, it gives you more tools to deal with that grief process. And I deal with grief in the book as well on a couple of occasions. One, a man knows his wife is going to die just because she's reached such a level of perfection that she can't keep living, and they call it transitioning, because she's not dying; it's graduating.
Right.
And another where a boy loses his grandfather. So his father has him pick up a twig, and it's burning, and he asks his son if the twig is being destroyed by the fire, and he says, "Well, I thought I knew till you asked me. Now I'm not sure, Father." And the father tells him, "Well, it's if you watch, you will see that the twig is turning into ashes and smoke. It's not being destroyed; it's just being changed. And if something like a twig cannot be destroyed by fire, something as magnificent as your grandfather's spirit could never be destroyed." And so it's that sort of thing. Like I said, it all depends on what you're looking for at the time. But I actually took that little passage there was my take on Einstein's theory of relativity, actually.
Okay, all right.
And simplifying it in a way that it could be applied theologically.
Right.
Matter not being destroyed, or matter and energy not being destroyed, but merely converted to one another.
I know that being the father of 7 and grandfather of 5 myself, watching all of those children and then some be born, and watching them grow and develop, I know for a fact, because of my observation and connection, that they did not just get here on those birthdays. What you witness when you see them, and what you witness when you look at them and say, well, look, I can see some similarities, but I see a determined idea in this child from the beginning. Especially starting with my second child, when I looked at my second child and I said, what is she thinking? What's on her mind? And I will tell you, looking at her nearly 22 years later, that same determined idea, that same determination, that same look, that same expression is there. And that I saw on day one. And I said, without a shadow of a doubt, these are people that come here with a determined idea. They came here with a mission. And wherever, if I can use the term where, using a space-time continuum term, or, from whencever they came, they definitely had for lack of a better term, pre-existence.
Okay, right.
And you can't have a create. That just lends credence to they cannot be created or destroyed, and we cannot be created or destroyed. We just change form constantly.
Right. And understanding that and living within that is what empowers us, because it's all about empowerment on a certain level. But empowerment also means being strong enough to allow, not necessarily to do, but to allow.
Right.
To allow yourself to be used, for divine purposes. To allow yourself to give, to allow yourself to hurt, to allow all kinds of things. Know that you're going to have adversity and that that's okay. It doesn't. Some people think, if you're not happy, you're out of divine order. Well, that's not necessarily going to be the case, because life is not that neat.
It's not a bed of roses, that's for sure.
No,
but there's a difference in looking at adversity and going through torture when you're going through that adversity, or going through adversity and feeling the burn, as one would say in the gym. You're feeling the burn, but at the same time, you're not dreading the burn. You know it's a
Right.
challenge. You know that it's hard. You know that you gotta push, but you understand, like that butterfly coming out of the cocoon, like that bird that has to peck out of that shell to get out. If you were to remove the resistance, you would destroy the bird. You would destroy the butterfly. It would
Right.
become deformed. So just like that, we have to understand that resistance is there for us. If you want that beach body, you need some resistance. Whether you use Tai Chi or yoga or straight weights and sweat and tears, but you got to have that resistance. But you embrace the resistance because you
Right.
understand it, rather than
Right.
dreading it and making your own living hell.
Well, the other thing I do is I've developed a diagram of the self, which consists of two concentric circles, one circle inside another one.
Mm-hmm.
And I do three representations of that. One has a small circle inside and a large circle outside. One has a large, the outside circle, there's very little space between the two circles. They're both very big. One just barely fits inside the other one. And the other one is like halfway between the two. There's a circle that's maybe 2 inches across, and then the outside circle is maybe 4 inches across, something like that.
Okay.
And the inner circle I label as God Spirit. The outer circle I label as conscious mind. And I hope this can be visualized. And the space in between is fear and insecurity.
Mm-hmm.
So when you have a very small God circle and a very big fear insecurity area between the two circles, that's your typical disconnected person.
Yes.
They live in that area between the circles. They're not accessing that God Spirit within. Conversely, when you have the two very large circles and there's very little space in between them, that's somebody who's very strongly connected because they are accessing that God power, and then they've minimized the fear and the insecurities that stand between them. You'll never get rid of your fear. You'll never get rid of totally of your insecurities, but acknowledging them means that you can work on them. And if somebody brings it to your attention that you have an issue with this, that, and the other, before you get mad, first thing you should do is try and figure out whether or not they're telling you the truth. Or is this person somebody who I trust to share with me something that I need to work on, and then take it for what it's worth. If I got a bad stain on my clothes and I'm getting ready to go out and you see me and you don't say anything because you don't want to hurt my feelings, I'm worse off going out with that bad stain than I would have been if you had told me, hey man, tighten up your clothes, or you see me getting ready to go out and my breath is bad.
Mm-hmm.
You're not doing me a favor by not telling me that.
Right. Right.
Tell me it's bad and I can go use some mouthwash.
Right.
And that's the whole concept of growing, developing, changing, becoming. It's about becoming, and what you're becoming in connection is authenticity.
Right. And I was just thinking while you were saying that there's a difference between dis-ease and disease, and there's a gap. Dis-ease can be anything that we're not at ease with, but that shouldn't be a lasting thing. We are always having a lack of ease if we're growing, because there's going to be a fear factor, or a disorientation factor, or a not quite secure factor. But then when we get to that point of saying, well, look, we embrace that, we're going to move past that, and we're going to get back to our God center and fill that gap, then we don't produce disease. But when we allow the gap to engulf us, when we look at that dis-ease state as something that we dread and can do nothing about, then disease occurs. Diseases of the mind and the body. And of course, everything starting in the mind translates to the body. People don't realize they create their own disease.
Yeah, because of the two C's, I think, that destroy us by seeking them, and that's complacency and comfort. And I know, like, talking about people that you've outgrown. I had a friend, many years ago we were very close, but he wouldn't go anywhere. So this was back in Pittsburgh. So he's never been to a major city. He won't visit me, and he has no idea what's going on in life on the planet because he's scared to leave his cocoon.
Yeah.
And we can get very complacent. So there should be a little dis-ease, as you say. There should be a little restlessness. If you're just totally comfortable, just completely relaxed in your life, you're not doing anything. You're not growing. You're
not.
You're just really just taking up space. I think one of the lines in the book is that the teacher in the book, and teachers are held in really high esteem, particularly good ones. He says that there's a divine imperative to grow. That's one of the lines that one of my characters says. We have a divine imperative to grow, and
right.
That's part of that too.
Yeah, well, definitely, and we have to always grow and evolve. That is part of life. It is part of the universal system. It's part of this Earth system. And if we stop growing, then of course we have to be rolling backwards. I mean, because as the saying goes, the world keeps turning. If we're not turning with it, we must be going backwards. Right. So we have to continue that.
Yeah, and empowerment takes a certain amount of humility as well as strength, and because humility is strength. I've been, as you know, I've been writing the political blog, Race and Politics, Idea Exchange, and one of the things that's come to me about the whole thing with people injecting racism where it shouldn't be, and why people aren't growing, and why, we're having a conversation that we should have been over with like 2 centuries ago, is the fact that when you're arrogant and you're trying to dictate to reality as opposed to learn from it, you can't learn from history because you're rewriting history as it exists. And so you're stuck at that, Neanderthalish kind of place. And we see that playing out on the political scene, and as well, when people will say, we're going to tell you when racism exists, for example, and you black folks can't say when racism exists. We'll tell you when racism exists. And the only time we're going to find it is when we say you are the racist. I mean, the Russian balls of the world. That you can't do that and have any kind of growth. You can't do that and have any kind of authenticity. You can't do that and become. You can only stay where you are. And it's funny. I've seen how the disconnected are very easily intimidated.
Oh yes, oh yes.
And because we're talking about how much you have to endure pain and stuff like this, and blah blah blah. But it's really hard to intimidate a person who's connected.
It absolutely is. It's virtually impossible to intimidate a person who is connected because they understand where their power comes from, and it's the same source that all power comes from. And if you know that, you're in the knowing within. Nothing can shake you because what is there besides me? It's like the ancient saying that says, I am that, you were that, all this is that, and that's all there is. And case closed, everything's dismissed.
Yeah, because, and see, part of the thing that comes from that power is that you have a safe place within. There's a safe place within where you can be who you really are. And when you lie to yourself, you have no safe place. Because there is no inner place, because there's nothing that's real. It's all what you try to manufacture in your head. So there's no place to just be who you are.
Right. Most of us don't know who we are. That's also important to point out. Knowing who we are.
And I have seen this connection at work. I mean, I can tell you about folks. I know, a man I know very only too well who doesn't even know how he feels about his own relationships. I mean, he doesn't know anything about anything. He blocks out everything he does that's wrong. He has to have, this is an educated man, a principal.
Yeah. I mean,
people tell him how he feels.
There are studies that between 85 and 95% of people don't even think, and they confuse mental activity with thinking. But most things are regurgitations of what we've been told. We've never come up with a original idea for 85 to 95% of us. Fortunately, that's only probably about 1% of our listening audience or less.
Right.
But the people who don't tune in, those are the ones we're talking about.
Right.
I'm not saying everybody doesn't tune in, but something like this, if not this show, something like this show,
Right.
something like these books that we're talking about between yours and mine, entertaining these things are not the common thread. They're the against the norm. Before we close out, because time has gone so quickly and I enjoyed every bit of it, I want to go ahead and give you an opportunity to give your information again in case people want to get the Megalight Connection or read your blog.
Okay, thank you very much, my brother. My website, and you can find the blog on there as well, but my website is www.williamgriggs, Griggs, all one word, .net, and the Megalight Connection is available there. If you want to reach me by phone, you can reach me at 312-752-8551. And the name of my blog, if you'd like to pull it up, I think the last one was on comparing Paula Deen and that wasn't the last. I don't even remember the one before that was Paula Deen and Bill O'Reilly and racism and sagging pants and stuff like that. And I talk about all kinds of things on there. Who really killed Trayvon Martin? A list of things. And that is Race and Politics Idea Exchange, okay? And I do hope to hear from some of your listeners and get some feedback. And if possible, I'd like to, get a copy of the show if it's available.
Absolutely, yes. We will definitely be bringing out that archive. And I'm going to leave with one last question from Brother Jamal, our radio head and producer. He asks, are we evolved enough to even trust what we are thinking is our intuition?
That's an excellent question.
Yeah.
It depends on the person. Some of us are, some of us aren't. I mean,
right.
You can't say are we evolved, because some of us put the work in to evolve, to become, and then others don't. That's why we have connected and disconnected people.
Right.
So there are some of us who can, and if you put the work in, you can develop that. It's like when you get that feeling when you go, man, something told me not to do that. Every time you disobey it, you mess up.
That is so true. Well, thanks for going and answering that. Well, we're about to come to a close. Thank you, Brother William Griggs, for joining me. And for you listeners, join us next week, same time, Thursday at noon Eastern Standard Time, 9 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, for another episode of the What If God Were One of Us show. Blessings to you.